Monday my day off. I had to go have something done that I just really, really dread. I'd have rather been going to the dentist, not for a root canal, but for a teeth cleaning maybe, even though I got that done the Monday before that. I get all these things done on my day off on Mondays. Back in the summer, I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this ringing going on in my left ear. And it was too much to be a coincidence. That's my monitor ear. And if y'all think it's loud out here on Sunday mornings, you should come up on the stage. It's because we're a bunch of old rockers and nobody up there can hear anything. And so that's my monitor ear. It's right there. And so it's like, oh, shoot, I've been dreading this day. My first thought is I'm losing my hearing, and it's called tinnitus. The novices call it tinnitus, but it's called tinnitus. And so I finally got in to an ENT and went through all kinds of tests with them trying to figure out what it was. And I had a hearing test, and lo and behold, my hearing, actually for a person my age, was still really good. They seemed very surprised, and they also were very disappointed. I mean, the lady who did my hearing test, she said, Dr. Lettner's going to be really disappointed with this test. I said, why? She said, because now he has no explanation for your ringing. So when I went back to him, he said, all right, we need to do one more thing. We need to get an MRI. Well, that may mean nothing to you, but to those of us who have a little bit of claustrophobia, it's a huge deal. And I didn't have that when I was young. When I was young, I was in a splunking club. How many knows what splunkers are? Cavers, yes. And as you get older, I don't know what happens. It's very, very common as you get older that you begin to develop claustrophobia. I was thinking, with our harvest party this Sunday night, which is at 6 o'clock Sunday night, dress your kids up, bring them. You can dress up also. Bring food Sunday morning, and I think that's all I was supposed to tell you. Anyway, we used to build the box mazes. Remember the box mazes over there where the teen center is? And it would be like we'd spend 2 weeks building this gigantic box maze in a 60 by 60 area. And we would send the kids through it, and the kids would have a great time. And well, this is cool. This would be like the old splunking days. And I got down and I started through those boxes, and I got about 20 feet in there, and I noticed that I started freaking out. It's like, what's going on here? And there was someone behind me, and I started screaming. I said, "You've got to back up. You need to back up right now." They said, "I'm not that close to you." They thought that I was just too close for a car. I said, "No, you don't understand. I'm going to rip these boxes apart if you don't back up so I can get out of here." And I've just never been that kind of person. Not only have I counseled many people like that, I've made fun of a lot of people like that. It's like, what's wrong with you? And so I think that's why it happened. God's just like, let me just show you something, buddy. So I've had a couple MRIs before, and so I was not looking forward to this or anything. And to make this one worse, he just wanted to do an MRI because he said sometimes with tinnitus, there's a little tumor in there pressing on things. He said it's very rare, but they needed to rule it out. By the way, they did rule it out. There's nothing there. I mean, literally, they said, there's nothing there. We've never seen anything like this. It's like, there's nothing there. That's the ringing, man. It's just like an echo in there. But if you've ever had your head, MRI'd, they put it in a little cage before they even stick you in the oven. And I call it the casket, actually. And when they slid me in, and I even checked on there. They said, "Do you have any issues?" And I'm like, no. And then they said claustrophobia. And I said, yes. And I circled it and put a big check mark by it. I didn't know what they were supposed to do about it. No one ever read it because they also did a contrast MRI when they finished the regular MRI. And I checked on there. I did not want that. They pulled me out, stick a needle in my arm, and stick me right back in the casket. So I said, I don't want that. It was too late. So 20 minutes in the casket, normal, pull me out, put dye in me, stick me back in for 10 more minutes. When I first went in, I'm telling you, I don't know how that guy did not hear my heartbeat. It wasn't beating fast, but it was beating hard. It's like boom, 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 boom. And it was just like reverberating through my body. It's like, and how many of you guys know about that mind over matter thing? And you intentionally try to employ it, and you pull on all your Zen techniques that you've learned through life, and you calm yourself down, and within just a couple minutes, I was completely calm. I wasn't happy about being there. It's the longest 20 minutes of your entire life. What makes it nice is because it's so quiet and serene there. What in the moon has to make that much noise and that many types of loud noises? It's just crazy. Even with earplugs, it's just like it shocks you. They say don't move, but when one kicks on, it's like you can't help but jump. Here's my point. There is a point to this. I did calm myself completely down, and I was fine. And I realized when I left, if I needed to turn around the next day and come back and do it, I could have done it easily. Wouldn't have enjoyed it, but I could have done it. It's because you fear things and you don't want to face things. But the reality is there is the ability in you to face those things. Every one of us has the power, not even through the Spirit of God in us, but just the very image that God made us in His likeness. We absolutely have the power to calm ourselves, to have talks with ourselves. When people get angry, you have the power to calm yourself down. Anyone that thinks they don't, they've deceived themselves. Or they are in a situation where maybe there is something a little broken in their mind and maybe they can't control themselves. But people who can't honestly control themselves have to be on medications or locked up. It's just that simple. The average person absolutely has power over their emotions, especially through Jesus Christ. But you don't know that till you're in a situation where you have to pull on that. See, I think about, for me, the absolute worst case scenario in life is for everyone to think that I died, there to not be an embalming law in this state, and I wake up and I'm in a casket 6 feet under the ground, and I just won't die. You just lay there, and you're scratching on the lid, and you can't get out. Have you ever seen movies like that? I've been in situations before, because we travel a lot, that I, some of the hotels, the ceilings aren't very high. If you've been to my house, and you've ever wondered why does he live in a house with such high ceilings? My house has 28 feet high ceilings in it. There's a reason for that. I have claustrophobia. And when I wake up in a hotel room and I open my eyes and there's a ceiling like 3 feet above my head, it looks like. There was one night about 4 or 5 years ago, I literally got up, left the room, and went outside and stood for a few minutes. I'm not that kind of person. It's just not me. I've never been, I'm not an emotional wreck. I don't get easily agitated. I don't get shaken. I don't fall apart. I don't get nervous. I'm the kind of guy, if there's a tragedy, I'm the cool, calm, collected guy that jumps in there and starts trying to help control the situation. I've never been that. It's just that one thing. Everybody needs at least one weakness, though. I probably have many others that I just won't tell you about. But we all need weaknesses in our life, because without weaknesses, we'll never pull on the strength that has been in us the whole time. Because when we are weak, guess who is strong? Yeah. So, I'm telling you this because I want you to understand this is exactly how faith works. T.D. Jakes, whom I love, good old West Virginia boy. My daughter just discovered that the other night somehow. When Hannah was little, she loved T.D. Jakes. And when she heard him preaching on the TV, she'd come running in there. She's this high. She went there. She said, "Is that Jakes? Is that Jakes?" It's like, "Yeah, baby, it's Jakes." And she was mesmerized by his preaching style, I guess because it's so different than Daddy's. And the other night she came running and she said, "Daddy, did you know T.D. Jakes is from West Virginia?" I said, "Yes, baby, of course I know that." And she was just so excited that somebody significant was from West Virginia. He says, you'll never know you have faith till you get in a good fight. You just don't. You don't know what's in you till something makes demands on it. And that's how our faith works. We build our faith, we build our faith, we build our faith. We walk out of here, out of church, out of our devotional times, whatever it is that's building our faith, the experiences of life we're going through, and we don't really feel anything going on, and maybe if you're from Pentecostal charismatic backgrounds like me, you go, well, I don't know if anything really happened. I didn't get any goosebumps, my head didn't spin, I didn't levitate, nobody swung from a chandelier. I just don't know if anything happened tonight. The deepest things God will ever do in you will not give you goosebumps. It surpasses your flesh. It is deep, deep things that God does inside of you. And you don't know it's in you till you're in a scenario where it's demanded. And it pulls it out of you. This is how faith works. The building of your faith equates to the pleasing of your God. I'm not going to rehearse the whole thing like I have been every week. I'm just going to give you a few bullet points in a little different way. The building of your faith equates to the pleasing of your God, because Hebrews 11:6 says without faith it's impossible to please God. Impossible to please God. Building your faith is the primary thing you do that pleases God. Our nature, while we're focused on deliverance in life, God is focused on construction. That's why you see all these stories of God from the very beginning. He's an architect and a builder. God in flesh comes. He's a carpenter. They're always building something. They're building an ark, and then they're building a tabernacle, and they're building a temple to move the tabernacle into, and they're building a wall and around Jerusalem, and they're just always building something. It's God's way of saying, this is what we do. We build. We're focused on deliverance, even in the category of faith. That's why faith exists, for deliverance, to make something go away, to get beyond something. We're just so focused on deliverance in life. But God is focused on construction, building our faith. Everything is about building or testing our faith. Everything. And the promotions that come with it. Everything. We make this God thing about so many different things. We're worse than the Old Testament guys who took the many laws that God had already given them and turned it into many, many more laws on top of that, that just got to the point of ridiculous, stupid things like you can't carry an egg in a spoon on the Sabbath, and just like, who come up with all these stupid laws? That's what we do. We complicate things. We've complicated God, and we've tried to just get a handle on how is this thing supposed to work. It's simple for God. God has children. We have children. God is trying to teach his children how to grow up. We're trying to teach our children how to grow up. We're trying to convince our kids that they can do things that they don't believe they can do. Is that not what? See, those early days and months, maybe few years of childhood, we know it's mostly about caretaking. But the only reason we're focused on caretaking is because that's all that's really available when they're that young. But as soon as they start growing on any level, we are completely focused on training them, teaching them, discipling them, convincing them that they can do things, pulling things out of them, putting things inside of them. Caretaking becomes a very small part as the children get older. This is exactly how it works with God. God is focused on building our faith. Your faith needs to become bigger than life. The life that's around you, the life that's in you, everything that happens around you and in you, around you with circumstances, environmental things, people things, all the way to the emotional things going on in your soul. Your faith needs to grow and be built to where it becomes bigger than all of those things. That is the will of God for us. And that is absolutely possible for every single one of us. You don't need theology degrees. You don't need to be walking with God for 40 years. You don't need to have some incredible testimony. Who was telling me today about the lady who she tandem jumped? Oh, it was Tim. It's a lady that works right up here at Princeton Healthcare, a young lady. He said she's 30, she's single, and she's really cute, and did I know any single guys looking for a good woman? I said, no, if I knew any guys that like that, I'd have done send them to Emily. So, Emily, that's what I do. I'm a matchmaker. I can't help it. I haven't found one worthy of you yet. Okay, there we go. She tandem jumped a few years ago, and the main chute didn't open, and then the emergency chute barely opened, and they come flying down out of the sky, and they came into some woods, got hung up in trees, and the tree limbs started slowing down, and they hung there in the tree limbs for 3 hours before they were rescued. I guess there was a big article on this a few years ago. I missed it. What a testimony. Now she feels that is a testimony. That's a wonderful thing. You don't have to have a grandiose testimony like that. Years ago, with our band, one of the things that we started doing was drug and alcohol programs in high schools. And we would go and do a concert, and then us 4 guys would share our dark experiences with drugs and alcohol and how we were delivered. And the schools then would let us share our testimony about how God delivered us. They wouldn't let us do that now. I had a niece who also played keys in our band in the very early years, and she came to me crying one day, very upset because she just realized that God could never use her because she didn't have a great testimony like us. That has nothing to do with God using you and building your faith. You know what I told her? I said, Pam, do you know the greatest testimony you could ever share? That I grew up and I lived my life and I never needed drugs, I never needed alcohol because Jesus was always enough for me. Tell me that's not a great testimony. This incredible faith that we're talking about found residence in the most simple of people in Hebrew culture. And God's trying to tell us that can be us too. Listen to me. Here's what faith can do. When those around you, this is a line from a song I heard this morning, then I built on it. When people around you say you can't, depending on what part of the county you're from, or which county you're from, when people tell you you can't, faith will tell you you can. Your faith will say you can do it. When people around you say you can't do it. When your emotions say, I can't do this, your faith will tell you you can do this. When your mind starts battling and playing those little head games and reasons out, you can't do this, faith will say you can do this. Faith needs to be bigger than everything in life. Faith is the realm where you can also say with Paul, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's not just because we're saved. It's not even just because the Spirit of God lives in us, or we're good and we keep the rules and we go to church and we tithe and we serve. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us because of faith. If you take faith out of it, we won't believe we can do anything. This faith is not awarded. It is built. And you get to decide the timetable of it. Now, I've picked on construction sites here on Wednesday nights and hoping that it wouldn't get back to the construction workers. But I've honestly wondered the last few weeks how many months or years it's going to take to pour a ramp on the front of that courthouse up there. They work day in, day out, dump trucks, heavy equipment, people up there. You cannot drive around that courthouse for a week or 2 weeks and drive up around there, and I promise you, you will not see one single thing that has changed. I don't know what they're doing. But it seems like they're busy. They're there. They're getting paid. I understand. It's a government contract. But you still get paid by the job. Of course, those guys get paid by the hour. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what's going on in the new dentist office up here either, but it's bothering me. You don't just go gangbusters for 2 weeks and then close up shop and leave. Now, that place should have already been opening and pulling teeth. There's something wrong there. Meanwhile, the Empire State Building, with one of the most famous, large, tall buildings in the history of humanity, was built in 14 months. Can you imagine us? They literally built the Empire State Building. It's looking like faster than they're going to pour a ramp on the front of the courthouse. Faith is not awarded. It's not divvied out at altar calls. It's not passed on through the laying on of hands. Faith is built, and you decide the timetable. Now, with that lengthy introduction, let's look at Hebrews 11. We're going to read 23 through 28 tonight. And then we're just going to make, instead of breaking it down, this little compilation of stories, it's changing. We've seen the stories of a very methodical way that faith is built from the very beginning, believing that God is the creator of the universe. The next step in construction was believing that God will take care of me. I don't have to take care of myself. I'm going to bring him my first fruits. I'm going to make God first, and I'm not going to have to worry about my life. And from there, it builds into a relationship with God. It builds into God being able to come into your life and challenge you to do specific missions, like the building of the ark was a specific season for Noah, a specific mission, a faith mission. God will be able to come and test your faith. It'll go all the way to what it invades every part of us. It even tests the words of our mouth. If you were here last week, faith begins to speak. You keep pouring faith in you, keep building it. I'm telling you, it's just like salvation. It'll work its way out, and before you know it, you're going to be speaking the very words of faith and declaring things and seeing things respond because of it. Now we're going to move into a realm where all of this is now beginning to set itself up more as a lifestyle of faith, where it's just a lifestyle. Prophetically speaking, there's 3 feasts, primary feasts in the Old Testament that prophesy of the 3 primary stages that God is trying to take humanity through. And Passover is first. We know it represents salvation. It's pretty easy to understand. The second one is Pentecost. We understand that because the Bible makes it pretty clear. It's being filled with the Spirit of God, where we are no longer just carrying the water around, but the water is carrying us. Do you understand the difference? The New Testament, despite all of the back and forth in the body of Christ, really makes clear that there were people who were saved. They weren't filled with the Spirit. Now they are filled with the Spirit. They were saved before they were filled with the Spirit, but then they were filled with the Spirit. Now something different has happened in their life, and they're bold and they're courageous and they're doing all kinds of things they were afraid to do before. And we've always compared it to if you go down here to this creek and you dip a cup into it and fill it with water, that's like, okay, you just got Jesus in your life. And now Jesus is going to go anywhere you go. Anywhere you carry that cup of water, you're going to carry Jesus with you, right? But the baptism in his Spirit, then you go to the bridge and you drop the cup into the water, and now you're not in control anymore. Now the water's taking the cup where it wants to go, not the cup just taking the water where it wants to go. It's a completely different thing. You got Passover, Pentecost. The third primary feast was Tabernacles. Tabernacles represented a lifestyle. This is just how I live now. This is how I tabernacle. This is just who I am now. That's where God is trying to take us, where we're no longer laboring with our faith. We're not laboring with our salvation. We're not laboring trying to be a Christian. We're not laboring trying to get things right. We're not laboring trying to abstain from doing things wrong. It's just work, work, work. He's trying to bring us into a place where this is just how we tabernacle, man. This is our lifestyle. This is just who we are. That's what these stories are about with faith. It has just become a lifestyle now. I'm going to read this small collection, and we're going to talk about the message that God is sending us about our faith in this. Verse 23 says, "By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict." And we're going to come back and finish that verse and explore it before we're done. But for now, let's add that to the collection of these other stories. "And by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible." Remember Hebrews 11:1? The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, the unseen. He persevered because he saw him who was invisible. Think of that. He saw him who was invisible. We can't just skate past comments. Do you understand how powerful that is? He saw him who is invisible. It's kind of like who was quoting from Revelation 1 here, someone a few weeks ago. Maybe it was me. I don't know. John, he hears a trumpet behind him, right? He hears a voice that sounds like a trumpet behind him. And he turns to see the voice. It was a picture of repentance. He saw the voice. You can't see a voice. Yet, it seems like faith takes us into a realm where we see the invisible, going back to Hebrews 11:1, with great conviction. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. You guys know this story that's unfolded through Exodus. The story of Moses. The Bible says that actually it was prophesied to Abraham that Israel would be in bondage for 400 years in a foreign land, which ended up being Egypt. It later on says that they were slaves for 430 years. I'm not going to split hairs on those 30 years because too many people get bogged down in stuff that just doesn't matter. They were in bondage a long time, for many generations. Long story short, they populated. And the Bible says they populated really fast. They didn't have birth control back then. And when you're a slave, you probably don't go to the movies at night. You don't go out to eat. So what do you do for recreation? You make babies. And the Pharaoh at the time, the Bible says that he was not familiar with Joseph. Remember when Joseph was second in command to the Pharaoh? And he brought his family, his brothers, to Egypt to save them from famine. And that's how his family ended up in Egypt. His family ended up being the 12 tribes of Israel. And so they have populated, and the new Pharaoh doesn't know anything about their origin, how they got there, where they came from. So he's only afraid of them. And he says they are reproducing so fast, they're going to get so strong, they could take over at some point. They could just take over our land. So he decides he's going to practice a little birth control for them. And he tells the midwives that whenever a baby boy is born, to go throw it in the Nile and drown it. If it's a girl, it's fine, but if it's a boy, drown it. Well, the midwives were Hebrews also, and so they wouldn't do it. And so Pharaoh calls them back and says, why aren't you drowning these boys like I told you? And they said, well, these Hebrew women are really, really strong. They're extraordinary. And they have these babies before we can even get there to help them out. Wasn't true, but Pharaoh bought it. So Pharaoh goes to his next plan, and he uses troops or whatever he has to, and they start killing all the baby boys, right? So the Bible says that Moses' parents, when Moses was born, he was an extraordinary child, and they could see that. How many of you parents can identify with that? Yeah, I know every parent thinks their child is special. And maybe not all of them are going to be kings and presidents, discover the cure for cancer and stuff like that. But I want you to know, this baby boy, Moses, does represent all children. And then the parent's ability to see something extraordinary in that child. If the parent doesn't see it, who's supposed to see it? And so we don't know how, but she has this baby and she hides him for 3 months. I mean, when she can't hide anymore, she takes him down to the river. They weave a basket. They put him in the basket in the bulrushes. Pharaoh's daughter goes down there to the Nile to bathe. She hears the baby crying. Oh, it's a baby. She's been wanting a baby. She takes baby Moses home, and now it's her baby. It's her son. She adopts him. That's why this story of faith for Moses now becomes so incredible, because he is in Pharaoh's family. He is in this culture where he has been positioned in just unbelievable ways. He's going to be an heir, potentially, to the very throne of Egypt. But the Bible says that he chose to identify. We don't know exactly a lot of the history here, but as far as the details, but you guys know one of the most supernatural, phenomenal things that happened is that Moses, of course, is a baby, They didn't really have baby bottles around back then, so he needs to nurse. Pharaoh's daughter cannot nurse him. She was not pregnant. She has no milk. She can't nurse him. And she just kind of says, hey, does anybody happen to know of a Hebrew woman that can come as a servant and nurse this baby for me? Well, was it Moses' sister that said, yeah. She said, you know what? I think I do know somebody. How cool is that? That now Moses' mom, he gets to come and actually be in his life and raise him. I don't know what happened there, but it sounds like to me that he learned some history through his own mother, and then hanging out with some of the Hebrew slaves. He's learning history about God, the creator of the universe. It comes to a point where he makes an intentional choice to identify by faith, to step away from the luxuries of Egypt, serving false gods. He finds the faith to step away from that and identify with God. Wow, what faith. What faith to go back after he kills the Egyptian slave driver, finds out that other people saw him. He thought it was done in secret. He finds out that it wasn't done in secret. He's afraid word's going to get out, so he leaves Egypt. That's when he goes and he meets his new wife and his new family. And then, God sneaks upon him one day through a burning bush and says, you need to go back and set my people free. And the faith it took him, because he did not feel that he was an orator. He did not feel like that he was good with his words, it appears. He just didn't have the confidence, the courage. He was afraid to go back. But he found the faith. He found faith that was bigger than his fears. He found faith that was bigger than everything that was battling him. His faith became, some people said that fear is the opposite of faith. That's not the whole truth, but there's a lot of truth in that, isn't there? That faith is kind of the opposite of fear. You see that through Moses, because faith helped him overcome his fears. And now he's bold enough to do something he naturally was not bold enough to do. And he leads the people free, knowing that probably that Pharaoh is going to come after him, and Pharaoh does come after them. But his faith is bigger than his fears. He started back somehow with that able faith where he just trusted God's got this. God's going to take care of me. God's going to take care of us. God would never ask us to do something. God would never ask us to write a check that he can't cash. It's just God. And he believed that. And even after he leads them into the wilderness, and he starts instructing them about the laws and about the tabernacle and the priesthood and the garments and all that stuff. When he's trying to get them out of Egypt, and God comes to him and gives him all this instruction about how to save them so that they can leave, and so it will turn Pharaoh's heart, with all the plagues and all that. Put yourself in his shoes, the boldness to go and say those things to Pharaoh, a king, the most powerful king on the earth. Just the faith. His faith had been built all the way through the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob faith that we talked about. Faith to speak, to declare, to release. He went and he told Pharaoh, here's what's going to happen. And he was just like Peter. He spoke believing, he was speaking the very words of God. And heaven and earth aligned and backed him on it. And God cashed every check that Moses wrote. It's a powerful story, powerful stories, this lineage of Moses. Here are the things that we learn about this lifestyle faith through this little collection of stories. In no particular order. First of all, we learn that faith is something beyond an event or a circumstance. It's not just something we employ because we're going through a hard time, we're going through a storm, something terrible just happened, we're in financial trouble, we're in legal trouble, we're in marital trouble. It's not just something we pull out of a bag because now we need it. We see, like through the story of Noah, There's what some people call event faith. God has called for an event to take place in someone's life and through somebody's life to do something really huge. You're going to need a huge amount of faith to do that. This is different than that. This is beyond event faith. This is beyond the faith just that can pop up in a moment to get you through something. This is faith bigger than just the momentary circumstances. This is a faith that's bigger than culture, its pressures, and its pleasures. Now, we're in a time in America right now where all hell is literally breaking loose in secular society. In secular society. Thank God we're not of this world. Everyone's just being ridiculous, infantile, moronic, insane. Just keep adding to the list. How do we, as the church, the body of Christ, how do we stand up in the midst of this? How do we stand up in a culture where the false prophet is constantly propagating their realities to our culture that Christians are simple-minded? Faith is ridiculous. The church is insignificant. They're not thinkers. They're not rational. They're not intellectuals. That's what I've heard multiple times on NBC, that Christianity is not something for people of intellect. It is non-intellectual. I've heard the people on the Today Show, Matt, what's his face? Yeah, heard him say it. Not anymore. He might know more now than he did. How do we stand up to that? Because our job isn't to try to out-intellectualize the world, to debate them with human wisdom. God never did it. We're not supposed to do it. Jesus never attempted to do it. He could have done it. He could have blown them away anytime he wanted. He used the things of folly. Faith. Faith is the counterbalance to all that. Faith is what makes us stand in the face of culture, just like Moses did in Egypt, with all of its pleasures, and all that it has to offer, and all of its temptations, and all of its pressures. I've got a feeling the pressures are only going to increase. And we've never been a nation where Christians have truly been persecuted. It is very unfair for us to even act like that compared to the rest of the world that has truly been persecuted and is being persecuted. But it's a different culture, and so persecution would be different from us here. It would be, here we wouldn't be beheaded, we'd just be an outcast. Wouldn't be offered a job or dismissed from a job. Wouldn't be shown favor in some scenario because, one of those simple-minded Christians, we really don't need them around us. Well, how do we stand up to that? How do we stand? It's in faith. It's just faith. Faith to be faithful to God. Think about that. Lifestyle faith. It's faith to be faithful to God. Not just in a moment, not just in an event, not just because something bad just happened and I'm gonna pull on my faith to get through this thing. It's not pulling on that thing just to get through that MRI and then return back to normal. It's the MRI reminding you that's in you anytime you need it. It's a lifestyle. It's the faith thing. The faith that is not dropping out of the sky or buried deep. It's there. It's bigger than everything else in your life. Faith to be faithful to God, to be faithful to His ownership. If you were here a couple Sundays ago when we talked about bond slaves. Faith to be faithful to His call in your life. Faith to be faithful to His purpose for your life. Faith to be faithful to His promises in your life. It's faith to be faithful to God. It's not in a moment. It's just your lifestyle. It's a faith that, according to these stories, a faith that is willing to sacrifice despite the unseens. Moses is in this situation. He can't see God, but he sure can see Egypt. He can see everything tangibly that's going on with that kingdom. And he chooses God. But when he does, it's a sacrifice. His parents had faith to sacrifice. They had faith to give up their son, as it were, because that was how they would save him, by giving him up. That's a sermon within itself, isn't it? That was a sacrifice. Moses sacrificing his position, his luxuries. You know, the man was rich and he walked away from it. His prestige. He sacrificed. When he led Israel free from Egypt, it was a sacrifice. He may have even been sacrificing his life. He didn't know. Faith that is willing to sacrifice. It's a faith that is capable of being obedient in our everyday decisions. That's what we're seeing. These are the things we're seeing in this collection of stories. Faith to be obedient. When God came to Moses and Pharaoh says, well, here's what's going to happen. We're just going to, we're going to kill all your babies. And so Moses goes in and says, well, guess what? Actually, this thing, I don't know if you've heard of Abraham's seed, but we're of Abraham's seed. If you want to be blessed, you're going to have to bless us. But if you're going to curse us, it's going to be returned back to you even worse. What did Pharaoh do? He had cursed them. They were Abraham's seed. It reversed right back on to Pharaoh and now on Egypt. And now they're going to lose their sons. And not just the baby boys that are being born. They're going to lose their sons. The faith to be obedient, to go and tell Pharaoh that news. And then the faith that when God says, and here's what you're going to do, because when the destroyer, when the death angel comes, he's going to need to see who is who. He's not omniscient. He's not God. He's not me. So there needs to be something that lets him know who is who. And so, you know the story. Kill the lamb, the perfect Passover lamb. It wasn't called a Passover lamb then. It became called Passover after that, because you take the blood of the lamb and you put it over the door frame of the house. And when the destroyer comes, he will pass over that house. So it became known as Passover. The blood of the lamb makes you safe. It saves you. It was just chock full of prophetic insights and images. But to have the faith to be obedient, to send the news out to all of Israel. Here's what we want you to do. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you've got to do this. You've got to kill the lamb. You've got to sprinkle the blood on the doorpost. The faith for simple obedience that is not so simple in everyday decisions. We're seeing a faith that always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Always perseveres. We just read that here somewhere. And it always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. It's not a momentary thing that pops up and down. It's lifestyle. It's consistent. Doesn't mean we don't have bad days. Doesn't mean that we don't have failures. That's not what I'm saying. Doesn't mean that some days you feel like it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Days you feel like a miserable failure. I'm a pastor. I know exactly what it feels like to feel like a miserable failure on days. But you're building your faith, and what I want you to understand is your failure it will not rock your faith unless you let it. The whole idea is that your faith becomes so strong that your faith is even bigger than your failure. That your faith is so big in being once and for all covered with the blood of the Lamb, the seal of God's ownership written upon your forehead, spiritually speaking. God's got you, good, bad, and ugly. He's forgiven your sins even before you commit them. He wants you to confess them so you can kind of let go of it on your end. It's not for his end. He wants your faith to be so big that even your failure does not take away from your faith. It always trusts, it always hopes, it always perseveres. It's a faith that identifies with God, and that's what Moses did. He chose to identify with God. It's a faith that identifies with God. In everything in life, it identifies with God. And last thing I wrote, and there's probably many, many, many more things in here. It's a faith where God is bigger than everything else in life. And we're seeing that in some extreme things here. We've got a Pharaoh who is wanting to kill all the baby boys. That's a big thing. That's bigger than any of us have ever been through. It's a big thing. We've got Moses, who is now torn between being a subject to Egypt and a subject to God. That would seem like an easy decision for us because we've never sat on a throne in Egypt with all of its luxuries and all of its riches and all of its pleasures and its positions and its prestige. Probably a little harder choice for him. He's in a scenario now where he's going back as the deliverer to lead those people free. And he's having to open his mouth and he's having to say things and declare things that if God doesn't come through, it's going to be a catastrophe. But all of these extreme things going on, he had faith that God was bigger than all of that. God was bigger than Pharaoh. It's bigger than Egypt. It's bigger than the choice of the many choices he had to make. Lifestyle faith says God is bigger than anything and everything. It's a lifestyle. It's our identity. It's just who we are. And to remind you, it's not awarded. It is built, but the timetable belongs to you. And everybody has the same opportunity and potential to build this faith. Now, we got a few minutes, so I'm going to circle back up to the top. And I want to talk about something here very specific that could be a sermon within itself. With this first verse we read. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Faith to see the unseen in a child and raise that child in the ways of God to protect and preserve the call of God in their life. That takes faith. Why? Because of everything we just talked about. The pressures of culture. The pressures and the conflict of life all around us. Is there anybody here that will be honest enough to say, and I guess I am saying it, and I may be alone, that on some days, the wrestling match with our kids, it would be so much easier just to walk away and let them just do whatever they want to do and learn the hard way someday. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of that. You got to let them touch the stove so they'll finally understand what hot means. Faith to see the unseen in a child, which is exactly what Moses' parents did. They saw something extraordinary in their child. If you see something extraordinary in your child, would you not do what you have to do to protect that, preserve that, extract that, disciple that, massage that, carve on that? According to this story, it takes great faith to do that. If you're a parent here with any kind of experience at all, you understand why. Because faith, from the very beginning of this chapter, we understand operates in the realm of the unseens. And you are tangibilizing something you saw, but what you saw was unseen. It hasn't been seen in the tangible realm yet, but you saw it. You saw it in your child. And now it's going to take a dedication of faith to stand your ground, to raise that child in the ways of the Lord, to endure that child without killing them while they go through their many weird phases. Faith to show grace patience, mercy, faith to bless and not curse when they absolutely deserve a good cursing out. That story is put in there by God for a reason. He wants us to understand that raising our kids, seeing something extraordinary in them, raising them and pulling that out, it's going to take faith. A lifestyle of faith. Not a moment of faith. Not a dab here and there. It's a 24/7 lifestyle faith till that child is no longer a child. And nowadays, I'm not sure when that is exactly. Somewhere in their 40s or 50s, from what I'm seeing.
So it also takes faith to stand firm in your belief in your child, because others won't see what you see in your children.
That's right.
And they may try to discourage you or come against it sometimes, and you have to say, no, I see that in my child, and I'm not going to listen to
Yep.
you. I have the faith that God put in me to
Yep.
keep my child, of course.
And I have to give my mom credit for doing exactly that. Because when I was a drunk, it didn't look real promising for me. And I was a reckless kind of guy. I wasn't the quiet little guy that partied. I mean, I was reckless. I've told you, I was the guy with the lampshade on my head. And my mom, I would hear her have conversations with people who would call her and tell her stories on me, things I wish they would not have been telling her. And oh yes, I got in trouble. But it never deterred my mom's faith, because my mom, from the time I was very little, my mom repeatedly, consistently declared that she saw something extraordinary in my life. What you see in my life today is what my mom saw when it was unseen. It was the Walt Disney thing, right? She did see it. Kim's exactly right. It takes faith to not agree with what everybody else is saying and seeing, and to stick to your guns with what you saw in the unseen realm.
Moses' mother did that because she went against the king's order,
Right.
and did not kill her child.
Right.
But then God turns around and pays her wages through the same kingdom so that she can keep her child alive.
Isn't it awesome?
It's awesome. It really is.
But also in another instance, you know, what she said about your child, we struggle with that with ourselves too, the faith. Because if you look at Moses, he struggled with what God wanted him to do. He said, I can't do this. You want to give me somebody else to go with me. You know? So we struggle with the faith ourselves. Because it's hard.
Yes.
It's hard.
It is hard, and that's why I'm saying you can't factor your failure in too deep to your measure of faith. The faith isn't going anywhere. Because you have a failure doesn't mean that your faith just flew away. The great irony of Moses, he's being talked about in Hebrews 11 as one of the great men of faith. And the sad truth is, he ended up getting replaced because of a faith failure. He had used his stick, smacked the rock, water came out, but God was trying to take him higher. And the next time he said, I want you to speak to the rock this time. And in that moment, he was frustrated. He wasn't all together up here, and he didn't want to do this new thing that God was trying to teach him to do, that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob tried to teach us last week. And he wanted to use the stick again. And God's just like, okay, I love you. You're my son. It's just time to pass the torch. That's all. My point is, that happened a long time before God had him written about in this chapter of faith. God still considered him a great man of faith. But that was a pretty major failure. More major than most of our failures, okay?
I think God understood, because Moses was so angry at the people's reason he did that. And God got so angry at him one time, he was ready to just wipe them out. So God understands when we go through.
I completely agree with that. And that's what I say, he had a lot going on. He was very frustrated, and there is no doubt when you read that story, and he took that stick to that rock, he was venting. And that in that moment, that rock was not a rock. That was the Hebrew people. I don't think he just struck it one time. He said, "You stupid rock." So that's just very important that I know I keep hammering that, but I know how we grew up in church. Sometimes we grow up in church where we're taught that our failures negate the God in our life. It doesn't. And I don't know how we get that, because the stories of the Bible, they just don't confirm hardly anything how we've preached the Bible. It's just, you build your faith, and you build your faith, and you build your faith, and you're human, and you have weaknesses, and you do stupid things, and you have failures, but you keep building your faith, and you keep flowing your faith. I promise you, I have not arrived at the full measure of any of this. But I can tell you that I am walking in a lifestyle of faith right now compared to where I was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 20 years ago. I remember when we planted this church, almost 25 years ago. You know, I was mostly operating in that event type faith. You know, I just have the faith to do that big thing, and then I've shared with you before. Once it was over, it's like, whew, wow, where did that come from? And now you're just back to normal again. But you keep growing, and it doesn't mean that you don't get upset. Sometimes it doesn't mean that you don't hear news every once in a while that kind of crushes you for a little bit. It doesn't mean you don't grieve when you have loss. Those are all human things. Most of those things are things that we even see in the very character of God, as he would get angry, as you just said. Things that would disappoint him. You can see God's disappointment often in the Bible, in his children.
That's one thing about the whole thing is it doesn't matter how many times we fail. God wants to take us higher and higher and higher. He never gives up on us. He never gives up.
Isn't that amazing that God can keep promoting us through our failures? That's why you humble yourself. You confess your sins. You do whatever it is that you need to do to stay on track. You don't throw in the towel. You keep going. The Bible is filled with stories of God promoting people through their failures. Why? Because it's not about us. It's about him. And where is him? He's in us. We're no longer presented to the Father in our own holiness, Paul said. We've been transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. He said, now we're presented to the Father in the holiness of the Son. Well, our identity, it's no longer us that lives, it's Christ Jesus that lives in us. So God looks at us and he just sees his Son. And he keeps promoting, equipping, training, teaching, and failure is a very, very valuable teaching tool, is it not? My daughter learns so much more through failure than she does success. So much more. Lifestyle faith. That's where God's trying to get us, okay? But next week it's going to be fun to see the things that happen when we see a little bit of a comparison between, it's going to help us. It's going to be a plumb line. It's going to help us see where we're at without any condemnation, but it's going to help us when we start seeing comparisons between lifestyle faith and religious faith. The faith that some of us maybe have been taught, and I'm speaking probably just for myself, because I trust me, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I love the charismatic movement, the stuff God did in my life. I would not be who I was without it. But it had its negatives also, where faith became methods and techniques and stuff. And we're going to see how those things separate to help us stay on the right track with building our faith. What faith is, what faith is not. It's going to be fun. Fun stories. All right? Sunday is Harvest Sunday. It's the last Sunday to bring food in. We don't know exactly what is going to happen on Harvest Sunday, because sometimes we come in and we go completely unplugged and we don't know, and we just don't know what we're going to do sometimes in there. But one thing for sure, we try to dress for the occasion. So if you got farmer clothes, country clothes, and you want to, it's just fun. You'd be surprised how that can fit into helping us get in the groove with what the Lord's going to teach us Sunday morning. It's going to be good, though. Harvest Sunday. And then Sunday night, 6 o'clock, harvest party back in the gym. Monday night, make it, take it, 6:30 here for you ladies. The ladies get to do all kinds of fun stuff. What would it be if we did a men's make it, take it? What would we make? I mean, Dan can make stuff, but what would we make? We'd throw axes.
Exactly, I want to hear it.
Deer antler chandelier, I like that. All right, let me pray for you. Boy, it seems so complicated, Lord, and yet it is simple. And when we start seeing it more simply, then our mind starts arguing. Human intellect, Lord, really is at enmity with you. Help us to get this, Father. Bottom line is we want to be pleasing to you. And we know being perfect kids is not what pleases you any more than if our pleasure was found in our kids' perfection, we wouldn't have much pleasure at all in our kids. So we understand that's not it. It's building our faith. You're so pleased by that. Your pleasure isn't found, Lord, when our faith is completed, when the construction project is over. Your pleasure is found in just the very construction itself. With every level, every new story, every new phase of construction, you're just taking pleasure in that we are in construction. Help us to know that tonight, Lord, that we can all go home just encouraged and edified, built up. That even though we're very imperfect, that we're doing a perfect thing. We're intentionally building our faith. And keep pulling us to this place of lifestyle faith, Lord. I know that people here are going through different things right now, and maybe some of them are going through some tough times right now, Lord. Begin to teach them now, Lord, how that their faith is going to displace some of their prayer life. It's going to change their prayer life. The things they used to have to labor over, whether it's through prayer or just backups or whatever it is, Lord, that now that their faith is actually going to confront those things. And Lord, we just yield the upcoming weekend into your hands. It is a focus on harvest, and Lord, it's a very, very intentional time. We know you want to do something specific in us, and we come with faith, Lord, ready to embrace it. And that's all I got to say for now. That's all I got to say about that.